On November 8, 2007, Sergeant Kyle J. White, Medal of Honor recipient, sprinted the 10-meter expanse toward his wounded battle buddy, with enemy rounds ricocheting around his feet and snapping past his head. How did he get in such a situation? What exactly happened on the 8th of November? Soldiers from 1st Platoon, Chosen Company, 2nd Battalion Airborne, 503rd Infantry Regiment, 173rd Airborne Brigade, based at Combat Outpost Bella, readied themselves for a journey to the village of Aranas, Afghanistan. The purpose of them being there was that there was a Shura meeting with local elders. This meeting was prompted by the limited communication with the village following suspicions of their involvement in a significant attack on Combat Outpost Ranch House months earlier. The attack left 11 soldiers injured and led to the closure of the outpost, which was once an American stronghold perched on the nearby mountain, overseeing the expansive village. Under the veil of night, a group comprising 14 American soldiers and roughly one squad of Afghan National Army troops stealthily advanced towards the American-constructed schoolhouse situated at the southern perimeter of Aranas. This location would serve as their overnight lodging. Kyle J. White remarked, "On the route from Bella to Aranas, the previous unit had experienced casualties. It's highly susceptible to attacks due to the extensive high ground that remains beyond our surveillance during movement." At dawn, the American soldiers and their Afghan National Army allies readied themselves for this scheduled meeting at the mosque. However, the villagers postponed the meeting, citing the elders' ongoing prayers, causing a delay of several hours. Eventually, the meeting commenced in the afternoon, around 1 to 1:30 p.m. The attendance of villagers at the Shura was notably high, with an unprecedented level of questions and engagement from the attendees compared to previous encounters. Initially, team members were encouraged by the heightened interest shown by the male villagers. However, Marine Embedded Training Team Member Sergeant Philip A. Box raised concerns when his interpreter intercepted radio transmissions in an unfamiliar language. Box promptly informed Platoon Leader 1st Lieutenant Matthew C. Ferrara that it would be prudent to depart immediately. Box said, "We need to get going. This isn't good. We need to leave." As the unit made their way along the mountainous path, several villagers trailed behind them for about 10 to 20 minutes until they veered off towards the ridge above. Almost immediately after their departure, the silence of the ridgelines shattered with precise small arms fire. The enemy launched a coordinated assault, striking the patrol from Aranas, the scouts' position for overwatch southeast of the patrol, and the unit's base, Cop Bella, all at once. White said, "There was one shot, down into the valley, and then it was two shots, and then it was full automatic fire and RPGs. It was coming from multiple directions. As I dropped that magazine and went to load another one, it was just lights out. An RPG hit right behind my head and knocked me unconscious. When I woke up, I was face down on a rock." He was armed with a fully automatic M4A1 rifle. However, Kyle White discharged his magazine towards both suspected and confirmed enemy positions. Upon depleting his magazine, he swiftly loaded another 30-round magazine into his weapon. However, his actions were abruptly interrupted by the detonation of an enemy-launched rocket-propelled grenade in close proximity, rendering him unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, White found himself under attack again as enemy gunfire caused shrapnel to fragment near his head, resulting in facial injuries. He said, "The shots rang out, and I never saw the rest of the element again." After the first encounter, Specialist Kane Schilling, along with White, Ferrara, Box, and the interpreter, got separated from the rest of the patrol. The others had to slide down a cliff, landing about 50 meters below and 150 meters to the west. White informed Staff Sergeant Conrad Begay, who was among those who had descended the cliff, about what was happening. This all occurred on a trail south of Combat Outpost Bella in the Waghal Valley, Nuristan Province, Afghanistan. The trails in the area are similar to the one they were on when the ambush took place. When the attack started, the 14-member patrol split up. The front part of the team managed to escape the main danger zone by quickly moving down a steep slope. But with the enemy positioned on higher ground all around, 4 out of the 10 who made it down the cliff were eventually killed by enemy gunfire. White noticed that Schilling had been shot in the arm. He went over to him and put a tourniquet on his arm to stop the bleeding. Then White realized that his radio, which he carried in his pack, was also hit and not working anymore. The only cover they had was from a tree that was sticking out from the side of the cliff below them, providing some shade and making it hard for the enemy to hit them accurately. White then saw that Box, who was badly injured, was out in the open about 10 meters away to the east. He shouted to Box to try and crawl over to where he was. Box tried his best, but his injuries were too serious, and he couldn't make any progress. White lost hope, he said. Box's wounds were pretty severe. At that time, I can't remember thinking he wasn't going to make it, but I knew I wasn't going to stop trying. No matter what the outcome, I'm going to do what I can with what I have. And after the radio was destroyed, I noticed a weird taste in my mouth. It was a kind of metallic taste, and then I felt a burning in my chest. Then White dashed across the 10-meter distance, with enemy bullets bouncing around his feet and whizzing past his head. When he reached Box, he shouted to the interpreter to help Schilling. But the interpreter couldn't move because of the enemy shooting at him. White started pulling Box towards Schilling. He noticed that the enemy gunfire was now focused on him, putting Box in more danger. So, White ran back to the tree to divert the enemy's attention from Box. When the shooting eased off, White went back to Box, dragged him a bit further, and then returned to the tree for cover when the enemy fire became intense again. He repeated this process multiple times until he managed to move Box to a safer spot. White put a tourniquet on Box's leg and looked after him until Box passed away from his injuries. As soon as White saw that his Marine friend had died, he turned around and saw Schilling getting shot again, this time in the leg. White ran to Schilling, took off his belt, and tied it tightly around Schilling's leg to stop the bleeding. White warned Schilling that it would hurt, but Schilling told him to go ahead. So, White put his foot on Schilling's leg and pulled the belt as tight as he could until the bleeding stopped. After White managed to stop Schilling's bleeding, he saw his platoon leader lying motionless, face down on the path. Thinking, I don't know how he is, I need to go see, White risked enemy fire once more, crawling to where Ferrara was lying. When he found out that his platoon leader had died, White returned to Schilling's side. Both soldiers' radios were damaged during the gunfire. White went back to Box, despite the enemy shooting at him, hoping to find a working radio. Luckily, Box's radio was still functioning. White used it to communicate with friendly forces and give them an update on what was happening. As the only paratrooper able to defend their position effectively, White shared crucial details that helped his company and battalion understand the enemy and friendly situation. This allowed them to start using mortars, artillery, airstrikes, and helicopter gun runs to fight back. This action stopped the enemy from gathering near the friendly positions. White then heard a hiss and felt a large explosion from the cliff below. It was a friendly 120mm mortar round. The blast caused another concussion for White. As he shook off the effects of the blast, he could hear Schilling yell for him to answer the radio. White said, I heard a hiss come from the left side of me. There was just a second of a hiss, and then a big explosion. And that one kind brought me down to my knees, because it kind of scrambled my brains a little bit there. That's the second time I was concussed that day, and it turns out it was one of our own 120mm mortars that came a little short of its intended target. So it was a little scary. It was a pretty intense situation. I wasn't a fan of it. After nightfall, White started telling the interpreter what to say to the Afghan National Army so they could set up a security perimeter. The enemy was still shooting randomly into the dark, hoping to make the Americans shoot back and give away where they were hiding. As time passed, White kept talking to the Tactical Operations Center to find out when the medevac rescue would come. He told Schilling that help was on the way, even though they still had to wait a few more hours. White also gathered up all the important stuff like radios and weapons and put them in one safe place, making sure nothing got lost to the enemy. White was feeling the effects of his head injuries. He could tell he was getting worse physically. So he decided to ask for Schilling to be rescued right away. He knew that if he passed out, the helicopters wouldn't be able to find them, and Schilling and the injured Afghan National Army soldiers might not make it. White marked where the helicopter could land and helped the medic lift the injured soldiers into the helicopter. Only after everyone who needed help was on their way did White let himself get rescued too. Later, he got informed that his best friend, Sean Langevin, couldn't make it. It was hard for him to hear this news. However, after more than 4 hours, the attack on Chosen Company ended, but not without a heavy toll. 6 American soldiers lost their lives, and many others were injured. Kyle White showed incredible bravery, standing out among his fellow soldiers. He took charge of his group, made sure they were safe, and helped wounded soldiers in an area with little protection. White showed no fear for his own safety, risking his life multiple times to help others, even though he was hurt too. Because of his quick thinking and ability to communicate with higher-ups, air support was able to come in and stop the enemy attack. This allowed all the wounded and fallen soldiers to be rescued safely. Specialist Kyle White received the United States Medal of Honor for his incredible, selfless, and heroic actions that day. Kyle White is an absolute American hero. So this is it, my folks. I hope you enjoyed watching today's video. Let us know what your thoughts are about this heroic story in the comments. If you love war stories like these, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave this video a like if you enjoyed it. Till then, take care of yourself. See you in our next video.